You know, the classic healthcare routine? I mean, we all do, right? You feel like a tickle in your throat or maybe this weird ache in your chest that just won't go away.
Right, and you just sort of ignore it for a few days.
Exactly. You wait, hoping it vanishes, and then you finally cave, you drive to the doctor, sit in that waiting room with the bad magazines, and they run some tests.
They draw some blood, you wait some more.
Yeah, and then finally you just react to the results. It's an entirely reactive system. You get broken and then you try to fix it. But imagine for a second if your clothes or just like a tiny invisible patch on your arm could tell you that you were going to get sick before you even felt a single physical symptom.
Just catching a physiological shift at the molecular level, right? Like long before it ever registers in your conscious awareness.
Yes, and that is the exact shift we're getting into today. For this deep dive, we are exploring a massively comprehensive journal article from Biosensors. It's titled AI-Driven Wearable Bioelectronics in Digital Healthcare.
It's a heavy read, but it's fascinating.
Oh, it really is. And our mission today is to completely reframe how you think about modern medicine. We're looking at this fusion of artificial intelligence and ultra-advanced wearable tech and how it's, moving us away from that old fix-it model into this highly proactive, personalized system.
Yeah, which is a huge paradigm shift.
So, okay, let's unpack this because we're not just talking about counting your steps on a smartwatch anymore. We're talking about lab-grade medical diagnostic equipment sitting right on and actually even inside our skin.
Right, and I think that distinction between, consumer fitness trackers and actual bioelectronics is critical. The step counters and those basic optical heart rate monitors we've had for the past decade, they were essentially just rudimentary motion and light sensors.
Like glorified pedometers, basically.
Exactly. They could tell if you were moving, but they couldn't tell you what was actually happening inside your bloodstream. What this paper outlines is a fundamental leap in biotechnology, where the device interacts with your biology on a chemical level.
To really grasp how these devices can actually predict illness for you, I feel like we have to look at the physical hardware first. Because, when I hear wearable sensor, my brain immediately pictures those bulky plastic smartwatches.
Or those terrible rigid chest straps.
Yes. The ones that feel like you're literally taping a circuit board to your ribs. But the sources describe something entirely different. They call it a flexible, breathable, second skin.
The second skin, yeah.
It feels like a temporary tattoo, but it packs the diagnostic power of an entire hospital wing. It's wild.
It really is. And the physical architecture of these sensors had to completely change to make this possible. If we look at the early generation of chemical sensors, like pre-2010, they were incredibly slow.
How slow are we talking?
They took over 30 seconds to respond to a biomarker. And that's because they relied on slow diffusion processes.
Wait, meaning what exactly?
Literally just waiting for your sweat or bodily fluid to physically pool up and reach the active sensor area. It was very passive.
Oh, okay. So it's just sitting there waiting to get wet.
Right. But the third-generation sensors, detailed in this research, they react in under a single second. And their sensitivity has improved by a factor of 1,000.
1,000 times. Wow.
Yeah. We are talking about detecting molecules down to the picomolar and nanomolar levels.
Which is a scale that is almost impossible to visualize, honestly. Finding a picomolar concentration is basically like searching for one specific misspelled word across every single book in the entire New York Public Library.
That's a great analogy.
And finding it in less than a second.
Exactly. Yeah. That is a highly accurate way to frame the processing speed and targeting. And the mechanism making that library search possible, it relies on 3 core components. First, you have the bioreceptor.
Okay.
You can think of this as like a highly specialized chemical catcher's mitt. It's engineered with specific enzymes or antibodies that will bind only to one specific target, like, say, a glucose molecule or a cortisol stress hormone.
So it's ignoring all the other words in the library, to use that analogy.
Precisely. It only catches what it's built to catch. Second is the transducer. When the catcher's mitt catches that specific molecule, the transducer physically translates that chemical binding event into an electrical signal.
Okay, so it turns chemistry into electricity.
You got it. And finally, you have the processor, which takes that raw electrical voltage and crunches the numbers to actually make sense of it.
And what blows my mind is the physical housing for these 3 components. The paper details smart patches that analyze the changing hydration levels of your sweat in real time.
Yeah, the form factors are incredible.
There are smart textiles, literal shirts that measure your electrocardiogram through the fabric, or like sports bras equipped with sensors to track cortisol directly from your sweat. But then, and this is the part where I actually had to reread it, the sources mention bioresorbable electronics.
Yes, the bioresorbables.
They describe them as implantable sensors that just safely dissolve into your body when their monitoring job is done. And I just have to pause here. Wait, time out. We are deliberately letting computer chips dissolve into our bloodstream.
I know, it sounds...
I mean, I feel like my doctor usually tells me to avoid eating heavy metals.
The hesitation is completely natural.
Huh.
But the mechanism behind bioresorbables is actually quite elegant. They aren't using toxic heavy metals like lead or even standard industrial silicon.
Okay, so what are they using?
These devices are built using biocompatible transient materials. For the conductive metals, they use things like magnesium or molybdenum.
Okay, I recognize magnesium from the vitamin aisle.
Exactly. When exposed to the body's natural fluids, these metals undergo hydrolysis and dissolve into harmless ions. They essentially become the exact same trace minerals you already consume in a daily multivitamin.
Oh, wow.
And the structural substrate. It's often made of silk or specialized polymers that the body metabolizes naturally.
Okay, so it's less like swallowing a smartphone and more like an extremely high-tech vitamin supplement. That's a relief.
Yeah, much safer.
But that brings up another question about the non-dissolving wearables, like those smart shirts. When I think of a circuit board, I think of brittle green fiberglass, right? If I bend it, it snaps and the electrical connection breaks. How on earth do you make a medical-grade circuit stretch like a rubber band without breaking the connection?
Well, material scientists had to completely reinvent conductive materials.
Yeah.
You simply cannot put a rigid silicon wafer onto human skin
Right, because their skin constantly stretches and twists.
and sweats. So researchers developed biocompatible elastomers and conductive polymers. A major one mentioned in the text is PEDAT.PSS.
Yeah, I noticed that. The paper drops acronyms like POT.PS and PDMS quite a bit. My understanding is that these are essentially plastics that can conduct electricity.
That's a good way to look at it, yes.
But how do they stretch without snapping the internal wiring?
It all comes down to the microscopic architecture. Instead of a straight, rigid line of metal, these polymers and metal nanowires are often engineered into wavy, serpentine structures. Think of the shape of an accordion or like an old coiled telephone cord.
Oh, sure, so there's slack built into it?
Exactly. When the skin stretches, the microscopic coils simply unbend and elongate. They maintain an unbroken electrical pathway, and they embed these conductive coils into materials like PDMS, which is this highly flexible silicone-based elastomer.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. The accordion structure absorbs the physical strain. But the paper also brings up a massive biological hurdle called biofouling.
Yes, biofouling is a huge issue.
Because even if the sensor stretches, the human immune system is notoriously aggressive, right? If you stick a foreign object onto or into the human body, the body's macrophages, the immune cells, they immediately recognize it as an invader.
They absolutely do.
They attack it, they encapsulate it in proteins and fibrous tissue to wall it off, and if a sensor gets fouled like that, it just gets clogged and it stops reading data.
Biofouling has historically been the death sentence for continuous monitoring. A traditional sensor would literally stop working in hours. What's fascinating here is how materials like hydrogels completely bypass that immune response.
Wait, by fooling the macrophages?
Precisely. Hydrogels are three-dimensional polymer networks that are highly water absorbent. In fact, they can be over 90% water.
Yeah, 90%.
Yeah, so because they're mostly water and mechanically soft, they closely mimic human extracellular tissue. When a macrophage bumps into a hydrogel sensor, it doesn't feel a hard, rigid invader. It just feels soft, watery tissue.
So the immune system effectively just ignores it.
Completely ignores it, allowing these devices to remain stable and perfectly accurate for months instead of hours.
That is incredible. So we have this amazing second skin. It's made of stealthy hydrogels and accordion-shaped conductive polymers, and it's gathering millions of data points a second, tracking everything from sweat chemistry to heart rhythm.
Right.
But this logically leads to a massive bottleneck. How do we power this?
Power. Always the limiting factor.
Right. I mean, my smartphone battery dies by 4 p.m. just from me scrolling through the news.
No.
How does a smart shirt analyze millions of health data points all day without a giant, heavy lithium-ion battery taped to your back?
Well, traditional batteries are simply too rigid, too heavy, and hold too little charge for continuous, invisible monitoring. The solution the engineers arrived at is energy harvesting.
Oh, like solar.
Not quite. The device acts as its own power plant, harvesting ambient energy directly from your physical body.
So we are generating the electricity. The paper specifically mentions piezoelectric materials. I know some high-end mechanical watches wind themselves when you swing your arm, But piezoelectricity is different, right? It's not a tiny mechanical pendulum.
No, not at all. It's completely solid-state physics. At a molecular level, piezoelectric materials have an asymmetrical crystal structure.
Okay, asymmetrical.
Right. When you apply physical mechanical stress to them, like when your chest expands to take a breath or your knee bends to take a step, you force the atoms in the crystal slightly out of position.
Oh, I see.
This physical displacement pushes electrical charges to the surface of the material, creating a voltage. You're literally converting your mechanical kinetic energy into electrical power.
Just by breathing and walking. That is so cool. And the other method they mention is thermoelectric harvesting. I assume that has to do with body heat.
It does. It relies on something called the Seebeck effect.
Oh, yeah.
A thermoelectric generator takes advantage of the temperature differential between two environments.
Like hot and cold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have your skin, which is sitting at roughly 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and the ambient room air, which might be, say, 70 degrees. That temperature gradient causes electrons within the thermoelectric material to migrate from the hot side toward the cold side,
Generating a current.
generating a continuous electrical current just from you existing in a room.
Okay, so the power issue is solved. But what about the processing? Because my immediate thought is, if this tiny sensor is only running on the friction of my breathing and the heat of my skin, it definitely does not have the power to constantly stream gigabytes of high-resolution medical data to a cloud server via Wi-Fi.
No, absolutely not. That would drain its tiny power reserve in seconds.
Right. Plus, if my heart stalls, I don't want to wait for my shirt to ping a server in another state and wait for a response.
And in a medical emergency, lag is utterly unacceptable. That is where the concept of edge AI becomes critical.
Edged AI.
Right. Instead of sending massive amounts of raw data up to the cloud, the artificial intelligence processing happens right there on the edge of the network, meaning physically on the wearable device itself.
To do that, they'd need incredibly small algorithms, right?
Exactly. Researchers had to develop ultra-lightweight neural networks.
I noticed the sources highlight 1D convolutional neural networks, or 1D CNNs, for analyzing things like ECG heart signals. And my understanding of a typical neural network, like the ones that identify objects in photos, that they analyze massive 2D grids of pixels, which takes huge computing power.
Right. Image processing is very heavy.
But health data, like a heartbeat, isn't a picture. It's a single line of sequential data over time. So a 1D CNN only has to look at that single line, requiring a fraction of the computing power.
That is the exact mathematical optimization they achieved. By stripping the AI down to process only one-dimensional time series data, these models have been optimized to operate on under 5 milliwatts of power.
Under 5 milliwatts. I mean, that is barely a rounding error for a standard computer processor.
It's astonishingly efficient. And because the device isn't waiting for a cloud server to receive data, process it, and send a signal back, the latency drops from around 500 milliseconds down to under 20 milliseconds.
Wait, so my literal t-shirt could be running a deep learning neural network powered entirely by the heat of my own body, analyzing my heart rate locally in milliseconds without ever connecting to the internet.
Yes. What's fascinating here is how edge computing solves three massive problems simultaneously. First, it dramatically saves battery life by eliminating constant wireless data transmission.
Makes sense.
Second, it provides instantaneous real-time alerts, which is the difference between life and death if the AI detects an impending cardiac event. And third, it secures your privacy. Your raw, highly intimate physiological data never leaves your physical body. Only the final processed alert like, warning, irregular heartbeat, is ever shared with your doctor.
That is an incredibly elegant engineering solution. So we have the flexible hardware, it's powering itself with our body heat, and it has an AI brain processing data locally in milliseconds. Now let's talk about what these AI brains are actually doing with all this data.
The real-world application.
Exactly, because here's where it gets really interesting. We're talking about real-world superpowers. This isn't just logging your heart rate for a neat little bar chart on your phone at the end of the week.
No, the paradigm shift is moving from merely recording historical data to actively predicting future outcomes. It's about anomaly detection and early warning.
I read the paper's section on recurrent neural networks, or RNNs, being used for diabetics with continuous glucose monitors. And to me, it sounded like the AI isn't just taking a static snapshot of your blood sugar, it's looking at the momentum.
Yes, momentum is key.
Like, if my blood sugar is at 90, a standard sensor just says you're at 90, you're fine. But an RNN looks at the past data and says, wait, You were at 120 10 minutes ago, 105 minutes ago, and now you're at 90. The velocity of this drop means you're going to hit a dangerous low in exactly 12 minutes. Is that how it predicts the drop?
That momentum calculation is the exact differentiator. And RNN is uniquely engineered to process sequential data because it maintains a hidden state that acts as a memory of previous inputs.
So it learns your habits.
It learns your specific metabolic patterns over time, how your unique body reacts to a specific meal, a stressful meeting, or a workout. By analyzing the velocity and historical context to those subtle patterns, the RNN predicts the hypoglycemic episode before your blood sugar actually crashes.
Giving you time to react.
It gives the patient the 15-minute warning they need to drink some juice, preventing the medical event entirely.
It's quite literally a check engine light for the human body.
It really is.
But it gets even wilder when we look at neurological tracking. The sources detail how wearables with simple motion sensors are using AI to analyze a person's walking gait or the micro movements of their hands.
This is truly groundbreaking work.
The AI can pick up on microscopic tremors or postural shifts that are totally invisible to the human eye, detecting early signs of neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's years before a clinical diagnosis would normally happen.
And that early detection window is where therapies are most effective. But the absolute pinnacle of this technology, the holy grail of bioelectronics, is what the paper calls closed-loop optimization.
Right. If the early warning system is a check engine light, closed-loop optimization is a check engine light that actually injects oil into the engine automatically while you're still driving down the highway at 70 miles per hour.
That's a very vivid way to put it.
But if I'm listening to this, I know exactly what I'm thinking. Trusting a computer algorithm to automatically inject me with a potent drug while I'm sleeping sounds like a sci-fi horror movie. What if there's a glitch?
The safety mechanisms rely heavily on a branch of AI called reinforcement learning. In a closed-loop system, the AI isn't just following a dumb pre-programmed timer. It is constantly monitoring your physiological state in real time.
So it's adapting.
Continuously. It takes an action, observes the immediate biological result, and adjusts. For a diabetic, the wearable detects the predicted blood sugar trajectory and communicates with a connected insulin pump, microdosing exact units of insulin to keep levels perfectly flat, adjusting minute by minute.
It acts as an autonomous pilot for your biology.
And for a Parkinson's patient, it's even more immediate. The AI detects the microscopic onset of a hand tremor and instantly tweaks the electrical stimulation parameters in a neural implant.
And stops the tremor.
It sends an opposing electrical signal to effectively cancel the tremor out before the patient's hand even begins to shake visibly.
That is just staggering. And all of this continuous closed-loop data seamlessly merges with your electronic health records, or EHRs. I think about a standard doctor's visit today, right? You sit in an exam room for 15 minutes once a year.
And that's if you're lucky.
Right. They take your blood pressure. Maybe you were incredibly stressed in traffic on the way there, so it's artificially high, and the doctor prescribes medication based on a false peak. But with EHR integration, the doctor isn't getting a snapshot. They are getting a complete 247 movie of your cardiovascular health over the entire year across every environment.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this fundamentally rewrites the definition of healthcare. We are moving away from episodic care, where you only interact with the medical system when something is broken, to continuous wellness management.
Always watching,
Always learning, and perpetually optimizing your baseline.
I have to stop you there, though, because as amazing as a check engine light for the body sounds, we have to look at the vulnerabilities. What happens when someone else is secretly reading your engine's data?
Yeah, the dark side of the tech.
Let's transition to that, because the sources dedicate significant time to the security risks. If my shirt is generating its own power, running local AI, and communicating with my insulin pump, it's still using wireless protocols at some point to update my doctor.
The communication layer is definitely the most vulnerable point. The protocols that allow these devices to sync with your phone or your doctor's dashboard, like Bluetooth Low Energy or near-field communication, have serious eavesdropping vulnerabilities if left unsecured.
So someone could just listen in.
If your smart patch is constantly broadcasting your physiological state, an attacker in a public space could theoretically intercept that transmission.
Imagine someone hacking your pacemaker's closed-loop system. Or like a predatory health insurance company secretly intercepting your wearable data to see that your heart rate spikes abnormally every time you walk up a flight of stairs, and then hiking up your premiums based on an unverified risk.
That's a terrifying thought.
The paper stresses that mitigating this requires medical-grade AES 256 encryption. And just to clarify for you listening why AES 256 is the gold standard. It uses a 256-bit key to lock the data.
Right.
The number of possible key combinations is astronomically larger than the number of atoms in the observable universe. Even if a hacker had a supercomputer checking a trillion keys a second, it would take longer than the age of the universe to crack it by brute force.
The encryption math is virtually unbreakable, yes. And strict compliance with legal frameworks like IPA in the US or GDPR in Europe is mandatory to ensure companies actually implement those standards.
Right, the law has to force them to use it.
Exactly. But security from malicious hackers is really only one part of the risk profile. We also have to address the algorithms themselves, specifically algorithmic bias, which the paper flags as a critical technical flaw in AI development.
Right, because an AI model is only as smart as the data it was fed during its training phase. If researchers train an AI to detect blood oxygen levels or skin anomalies using optical sensors, but the data set predominantly features lighter skin tones.
It fails on darker skin tones.
Right. The math literally does not know how to correctly adjust for the light absorption properties of higher melanin concentrations.
It represents a fundamental technical failure in the training parameters. If the training data lacks demographic diversity, the wearable will mathematically fail to accurately diagnose minority patient groups.
That's a huge problem.
It will generate false positives or entirely miss critical health events simply because it wasn't taught what those events look like across different physiologies.
And that leads directly into the legal nightmare of liability. Let's say a closed-loop system is running. The AI algorithm misinterprets a signal, maybe due to that biased training data, and it recommends the wrong treatment, or misses a massive heart attack and the patient dies.
Right. Who's to blame?
Exactly. Who is legally responsible? Is it the software developer who coded the neural network? Is it the attending doctor who trusted the AI's dashboard? Or is it the patient who maybe didn't place the hydrogel patch on the exact right spot on their chest?
This raises an important question regarding trust and the black box problem of AI. Deep learning models often operate as a black box. They can provide a highly accurate prediction, but their internal neural pathways are so complex that human engineers cannot always explain the exact mathematical reasoning behind how the AI arrived at that specific conclusion.
It's just too layered.
Exactly. And if a doctor refuses to trust a black box AI making life or death recommendations, or if patients fear their data is being used against them, adoption will completely stall.
And we absolutely cannot talk about adoption without talking about accessibility. I want to push back heavily on some of the techno-optimism we've been discussing here.
Fair enough.
We've talked about these dissolving medical implants and self-powered hydrogel shirts, like they're going to save the world tomorrow. But right now, developing biocompatible polymers and edge computing chips is incredibly expensive.
It is, yeah.
If we don't fix the affordability issue, we aren't democratizing healthcare at all. We are just creating a terrifying new digital divide where only the wealthy get early warnings for heart attacks and automated insulin, while everyone else is stuck waiting in a clinic for a reactive 15-minute doctor visit.
That is a highly valid critique, and it is a manufacturing bottleneck that researchers explicitly acknowledge. However, the sources do point to emerging scalable manufacturing breakthroughs that aim to solve that exact cost issue, specifically a technique called roll-to-roll printing.
I saw that in the article. Tell us how roll-to-roll printing changes the economics of this.
So traditionally, you build computer chips one by one in multi-billion-dollar clean rooms, which drives the cost per unit sky high. Roll-to-roll printing completely bypasses that. Imagine a massive high-speed newspaper printing press.
Okay, giant rollers with paper.
Right. But instead of ink, the press is rapidly laying down microscopic conductive polymers and bioinks onto continuous massive spools of flexible plastic or textile substrates. This continuous manufacturing method reduces production costs by 40 to 60% compared to traditional fabrication.
Printing life-saving medical sensors the exact same way we print the Sunday newspaper. That is brilliant.
In addition to roll-to-roll printing, engineers are pushing for modular device architectures. Instead of forcing a patient to buy an entire new $500 device every time the chemical sensor degrades, the architecture is split.
So you keep the expensive part.
Exactly. You keep the expensive processing module, and you simply snap in a cheap 50-cent hydrogel sensor module every few weeks. These scalable techniques are absolutely critical to ensuring this technology scales globally and doesn't just become a boutique luxury for the few.
So we have covered a massive amount of ground here today. Let's distill the core insights for you listening. Wearable bioelectronics have evolved light years beyond simple bulky step counters. We are entering a tangible era of microscopic, AI-driven laboratories that adhere invisibly to your skin.
Empower themselves.
Right. They harvest their own electricity from your body heat and movement, and they use edge computing to process complex neural networks locally in milliseconds to protect your privacy.
They can predict diseases like diabetes, Parkinson's, and heart failure long before a symptom appears.
And use closed-loop systems to automatically administer treatments in real time. It is a total redefinition of modern medicine, but only provided we can rigorously secure the data, eliminate technical biases in the algorithms, and manufacture them cheaply enough for everyone on Earth.
It represents the ultimate promise of digital healthcare, making the invisible physiological world visible, and fundamentally shifting the human experience from reactive survival to proactive wellness.
So what does this all mean? We've talked about the incredibly complex hardware, the AI software, the legal hurdles, but I want to leave you with a philosophical question to mull over on your own.
A provocative one, I'm sure.
I think so. If our clothes, our skin patches, and our dissolving implants become capable of predicting our illnesses before we even feel a single physical symptom, how will that alter our psychological experience of being alive?
Oh, that's heavy.
Right. When your shirt knows you're going to get the flu 3 days before you do, will we feel empowered and invincible, finally in total control of our biology, or will we spend our entire lives feeling like permanent patients, just nervously waiting for a smart shirt to sound an alarm?
The psychological weight of constant, inescapable physiological self-awareness, it's an entirely new frontier for the human mind.
It's a completely unprecedented way to inhabit a human body. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the source material. We hope it gave you a few aha moments to take with you and share. Stay curious, keep learning, and we'll catch you next time.